Welcome all to the Node, your place for no hype news. And I am Mike, aka Veteran Crypto. And with me, as always, is David. How's it going, brother?
I'm doing well, Mike. Doing well today, man. Happy to be here and looking forward to talking about Trump and some crypto, some DeFi. And I see in the chat that Ellie changed her picture.
I
Uh,
noticed that.
yeah,
I'm trying to figure out what the hell that is. It looks like a guy with a big mustache.
I can't tell what it is either, but that's cool.
All
Yeah,
right. So let's jump into this. First of all, let me pop on over here to my shared screen. So if you want to join the conversation and you want to follow us on YouTube and not miss any of our shows, we are a network here. So you can find us at the Node Network, all one word is our handle. You can see our live show that's live right now. You can see all of our past live streams, our shorts. You can see that we go live Monday through Friday for the Node Show at 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern. Crypto and Chill on Tuesdays, and tonight, Friday, at 5 p.m. is when me and Jeff get into basically just have a drink and kind of talk about what's gone on in the past. On Fridays, we talk about kind of what happened in crypto and the news over the past week, and just how those news stories have evolved. Just kind of, really is just we just talk about crypto and chill. I mean, that's really the long and the short of it. The blockchain report Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday at we're changing that to 11 a.m. So it's right after this show, and that is where Jeff talks about early projects and and sometimes airdrop farming. So that's kind of been his thing for quite some time with the blockchain report. So if you're interested in getting in on early projects, Sovereign Soil on Saturdays at 6 p.m. That's my new show, and sometimes Drew goes on with me. But that's where we talk about homesteading and emergency preparedness. So if that's something that you're interested in, or interested in developing those skill sets, David has the market wrap Monday through Friday at 1 p.m. Pacific, and that's of course Eastern. That's 4 p.m. when the markets close. And on Tuesdays and Thursdays, you can see that he's started with Ellie, taking her through his one-on-one paid coaching course. But we offered it to her for free. Or I said the F word. At no charge, so that we can demonstrate, just how successful and how quickly, David's able to take somebody from not being a DeFi investor and knowing, different levels of experience with crypto and investing, and taking them all the way up to a competent, DeFi investor. Saturday Night Fever at 6 p.m. on Saturdays, and that is where Jeff, he has been DJing for quite some time, has a bunch of friends that are DJs, so he does interviews and tutorials, if that's something that you're interested in. Last night, we did the Red Pill. That's just where we have a group of people. It's random. Different people show up. David didn't make it last night. He was probably busy working on AI. But
sure. Yes, I was.
Yeah, we just talk about topics and different things that are going on. Just in the world, and just kind of things that usually are considered taboo to talk about, but we show that you can talk about those things and have debates, healthy debates, and still come out amicable on the other end. Gaming and Chill, Ellie and Jay, they on Wednesdays and Sundays at 8 p.m. I think it's 6 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Central, 9 p.m. Eastern. They go live and just play different games. So the last one was Fortnite. They do a lot of Arc Raiders. At one point, I believe Jeff went live and did the Pudgy Penguins game. And then Ellie actually lined up an interview with DeFi Kingdoms, a Web3 game. And so one of the members of that team is going to come on. She's going to do an interview. So kind of excited to see how that goes. That's their first interview. So yeah, if you're interested in any of that, that's what we got going on here at the Node. Now over here on X, you can find us at the Node channel, all one word, and on our official website, thenode.pro. You can see that you can watch us live. If I hit this will actually play live. We have the chat. You have the links to the news that we talk about on the live show. And you have links to a DeFi University. which is no charge, and you can go through a structured course that teaches you all about traditional finance and banking, wallets, DeFi, crypto. They're just all the different aspects of getting up to speed so that you can competently invest. And again, that's no charge. The private coaching, that is a paid service, but that is intensive one-on-one time with David, where he holds your hand and he structures the the education specifically to you. So it's a very bespoke learning experience. I'm trying to
That's great, Mike.
vocabulary. Now the AI newsletter is almost ready, and this is super unique. I haven't seen anything like it. So we built this out, and you can choose the assets that you are interested in: crypto, stocks, commodities. As long as there's a ticker, you can put it in there, and you can generate your own custom newsletter. And it will tell you trading ranges. It will tell you, give you social media posts, links to social media posts about what's going on with the tickers that you selected. It will give you hot news that's going on with links to the news so you can read articles. And it will also give you liquidity pool ranges if you want to enter liquidity pools. So this is something that I just haven't seen, that offers everything that this offers, and all of it in real-time data for assets that you choose, not something that I choose or David, chooses. If you want to be a pure degen and do it for nothing but memes, you can do that. I wouldn't suggest it, but you do you. So let's see. I'm getting better at that. I'm down to 7 minutes.
All right. I know that was pretty good, man. that AI newsletter, just so that everyone knows, it's actually a lot more complicated than you might think.
Yeah.
It's a combination of a bunch of services on Google Cloud, and then it's just stitching things together to make them all talk to each other. So it's using Shopify and Google Cloud and Stripe, and making sure that all the emails in Klaviyo are working, and making sure that the emails from Gmail are working, making sure that the AI is pulling data from the right sources. Mike, if you click on that newsletter tab there, then everyone will get a description of exactly what it is if you scroll down. So it's the ability to receive before the market opens and after the market closes every day, and just on demand, a recap of, hey, this is what's going on with the assets that you have on your watch list. So that's actually really, really valuable. So yeah, this is in the works. The newsletter itself is done. It's just making sure that the entire thing works properly. Testing it, debugging. That's the last part that I've got going on. So, but it's pretty cool, man.
No, I like it. I'm just doing some quick math here. Yep, 66 cents. So for 66 cents a day, it's $20 a month, 66 cents a day. And again, I mean, how much time would that save you? As far as going around and trying to figure out trading ranges and reading charts, and searching around social media and looking for news articles, and just all the different stuff. All you got to do is click generate, and on your account it will save. You don't have to pick them every time. You can swap them out and change them, but it will remember the ones that you picked last time. And you can, just generate it for the same ones. Or if you sell an asset, like I just sold all my Ondo, and if I want to remove that, I just remove that. And if I bought something else, I add that. And it's just that easy. And then you hit generate. So, I mean, basically you can get your finger on the pulse of what's going on with your investments, in the time it takes for you to drink a cup of coffee or tea. That's, for me, I mean, my time is worth more than 66 cents, a day. So that is that. Well, let's jump into the news, because there's a lot going on, and I definitely want to, actually, you know what? Let's show this. So this is the board of the Canton Foundation, which I kind of found interesting. So let me see if I can zoom in on this. Oh, it's not going to let me zoom in on it. All right. So we got a lot of influential people in here. So let me see if I can cherry pick some of these. I just found it interesting, and there was one of them that kind of stood out to me, which was weird because on Aerodrome, I ended up getting a airdrop, for an early project called T Rise, and I believe it's a tokenization play. But I kind of at first I didn't really look into it. I just kind of figured that it was a meme coin at first, and so I just sold it. And I kind of think I should have kept it because looking at this project, they're getting a lot of traction when it comes to RWAs and tokenization. So we might have to talk about it sometime, but this is just I just found this interesting, just to see that the people, and I reposted this if you want to check it out on our X account, and just get an idea of the people that are behind, the board members that are behind the Canton Foundation. So,
Yeah,
Tal,
I'm reading
oh,
through
go ahead.
the list of names here, Mike. It's Jorgen Waknine. Oh, Wokanine. He's but the thing that's interesting is dude's part of Euroclear, and Euroclear. I think that's the a big European clearinghouse. I think for just listed equities. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah,
Um, and then but he's part of he's on the Canton board, global head of innovation. So I mean, look, like, and that's just one guy.
yeah,
But to have people who also hold influential roles in tradfi areas on the
mhm,
board of Canton, that just tells me that, hey, you know what, these guys are really serious. Canton is really serious about you know getting big institutions to adopt digital rails, and I
yeah.
think that that's what's happening.
Well, and like it or not, that's how the world works. Is when it comes to politics, and that a lot of people, they want to, they don't like it when people in crypto talk about politics. If you don't understand the relationship between finance and government and politics and all of that, then you probably shouldn't be investing. You love it or hate it, and this is what we're going to talk about a little bit here in a minute about Trump. It's politics has a huge part in financial markets, money and power. And, financial markets, that's what facilitates both, so, sometimes you have to, put on your big girl and big boy pants and, talk about and, look at things that, maybe make you uncomfortable, take you out of your comfort zone.
Yeah, I'm still a hardcore libertarian though, Mike.
Oh no, absolutely. But ignoring the simple fact that the world is the way that it is, it's you can't you can't live in a bubble. Your personal feelings can't dictate for the most part how you invest if you want to be successful in investing. It's it's just kind of the way it is. I mean, if you're politics, like you hate Elon Musk because he backed Trump, and so you're not going to invest in Tesla, you're not going to invest in SpaceX, you're not going to invest in certain things because of your feelings or politics. It's going to seriously hinder your potential success. So what's you can do a lot more to change the world if you are successful than if you just sit and you're angry and complaining about everything all the time in your mom's basement eating Cheetos.
Yeah, you don't want to do that.
Yeah. I would much rather, have money and influence and be able to make real change than gripe on social media all day about, everything I don't like, because that doesn't change anything.
Bro, I'm so happy that I don't respond to anyone on social media for
Yeah.
anything. Like I don't talk shit to anyone. I don't get into like, Twitter arguments. Like
It's my
I
guilty
don't
pleasure. I love just, stringing people along and trolling them. I can't help it. Because I, I, it's getting people, whenever people say smooth brain shit and then they are obviously ruled by their emotions, I like to pull that thread. and get them like super emotional to where they have meltdowns. I
It's
can't.
it can be kind of entertaining for
It is.
sure.
It
Yeah.
is. So,
Oh,
what can you
we,
tell us
we
about Tau,
we got
dude?
some great. Oh man, Tau. Yeah. So BitTensor Tau. The thing about BitTensor Tau is they've got all of these subnets on BitTensor Tau. And you know what? I'm just going to go ahead. I want to get a really good definition of them. I think that they're basically businesses. Yeah, what are the subnets? So there's a handful of them that my understanding is that there's a handful of them that are actually really successful businesses that generate a lot of revenue
Mhm.
and um, that return that revenue to token holders. Now, when you gain exposure to a subnet on BitTensor Tau, you can do so by swapping, I believe it's a swap, although it could be referred to as a stake, where you take your Tau. I believe that you have to stake it in the subnet, and then you receive the subnet. They're called alpha tokens. So when you receive these alpha tokens, they're basically like not quite like shares of stock in a company, but they do allow you to gain exposure to the revenues of that subnet. So there are subnets that are focused on AI training and compute. One of the biggest ones is Shoots. That's subnet 64. So
Mhm.
that's a serverless AI compute platform. There are subnets focused on media and content generation. One of them is called Niche Image. It's focused on decentralized image generation. So, there are a lot of interesting subnets on Tau. There are subnets focused on data and specialized logic. So here's the economic model, though. So every subnet economy is driven by tau, driven
Mhm.
by d tau. So each subnet, except for the root subnet, has its own alpha token. So every single one of those, I think there's like 120, maybe just a few more than that of
Mhm.
these subnets on BitTensor Tau. They each have their own alpha token. And so to earn the rewards or to use a subnet's services, you have to stake your Tau into that specific subnet. And so all it does is it converts your Tau into that subnet's alpha token. And
Mhm.
so then the amount of new Tau each subnet receives every day is determined by how much Tau the community has voted into it through staking. So it's the staking mechanism is the incentivization mechanism for that subnet to receive more Tau every day. Um, Now, here's the thing, though. This looks great, right? But does this need to be decentralized? Like, does this need to operate on a decentralized network? Can what the subnets do on BitTensor Tau be done in a superior way and in a more efficient way just by like some massive corporation? Can you get done what happens on the BitTensor Tau subnets? Can you do that on Google Cloud for less? I
Yeah.
don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
Um,
Good question.
but yeah, so you just got to think to yourself, like, this is a really interesting project, but does it need to be? Does it need to be, decentralized in this way? And I
Well,
see.
I guess the dump came from Covenant AI. It was one of the subnets. I believe it was the largest on Tau. Announced they are leaving BitTensor and reportedly sold 37,000 Tau worth $10 million. They've accused BitTensor founder of running a decentralized theater lie and controlling many aspects of the protocol. So basically, saying it's decentralized, but behind the scenes, they're claiming that the founder is the one pulling all the strings.
Yeah, well, that doesn't surprise me because if most of the tokens and therefore most of the power is centralized in one entity or one individual or just like a handful of entities that can collude together, then it's really not decentralized at all. And the thing for me with many of these, blockchain protocols, many of these new projects, is, for me anyway, when I'm thinking about them, I really have to take a step back and ask myself, like, why does this thing even exist? like what problem is this really solving for?
Yeah.
And then once I identify what the problem is, the pain point that the protocol is trying to solve for, then I've got to ask myself, well, does it actually generate any revenue? Is
Mhm.
this a successful business? If yes, well, great. But are those revenues returned to me if I'm a token holder? If no, well, then it's uninvestable for me.
Well,
So,
and you can be bullish on the project and and the pain point that they're trying to solve, and if they end up doing an IPO where you can buy a stock, like we were talking about yesterday, that new project where potentially you could, by holding it and staking it, backpack, that potentially you could get like a basically an airdrop. We'll see how that pans out, but an airdrop of the stock. Now that's a different story, because then you have a stake in the success of the company, a legal stake. Whereas a lot of these tokens, like David's talking about, there's no contract, there's no legal obligation between you and the company. So they're basically using the speculative asset of their token to sell to fund operations. Our favorite one to point out that's doing this is XRP and Ripple. They are dumping Ripple on retail, putting out bullish news and stuff like that to get the price to go up so that they can sell, their monthly unlock of, 1 billion XRP tokens. And, they don't always sell them, but they very openly admit that they sell XRP to fund operations. And
they
that's,
admit that they're a scam.
well,
Like,
you know,
that's what they are.
you can, people can take that how they want, but they openly admit that they sell XRP to fund operations. So why, if they're taking over the financial system, why are they selling XRP? Or if XRP is going to go, the better question, if XRP is going to go to 589 or $10,000, why the hell would Ripple be selling any XRP?
Well, XRP is going to zero. So
I just, I,
you heard it here first, Mike.
I'm just posing that question though. If Ripple genuinely thought that XRP was going to some high valuation, why would they be selling any tokens?
No, I mean, so the problem for me, and it's not just Ripple, bro. It's like
Oh no, no, no.
it's most.
We like to use that one because it's one of the most well known, highest market cap, most hyped projects out there. That's why I like to use it. It's because nobody in crypto more than 2 days hasn't heard of XRP.
Right. I think the reason why XRP is so easy to dump on is because number one, it's a straight up scam, but
Yeah.
also it's the biggest scam in
Yes.
crypto that still exists right now. It's an $80 billion market cap straight up scam. And it's like, but the problem for me though, Mike, and the reason why I think there's going to be an alt-mageddon this year
Yeah.
where alts just get slaughtered even more than they already have. Is because most crypto projects
Or vaporware.
are vapor.
Yeah.
There's no nothing. There's no
Yeah.
there.
No.
And what they claim to be solving for is, for many of them doesn't need like there's no pain point. There's nothing they're not actually providing any value whatsoever. And then once you get down to the token layer, and most of these tokens, number one, there's no connection between the token and the protocol revenues.
Mm.
But most of these protocols don't actually generate much revenue at all. So,
If any.
uh, if any, and even some of the most successful protocols
Mhm.
don't generate much revenue. So, yeah, man, I think that there's going to be an alt-mageddon. But what do you got here with Aerodrome? Because this is one of the alts that I know that you really are bullish on, and I have a different opinion.
Oh
But
yeah.
yeah, tell us about this.
Oh, it's something I didn't realize. So it looks like every currency is on chain on base on Aerodrome. So it looks like there's USDC, the euro, the Mexican peso, the Singapore dollar. So there's a forex market that's emerging on Aerodrome. And something I learned is I thought it was coming. I didn't realize it was already a part of Coinbase. So Aerodrome is the liquidity layer under a lot of Coinbase's current offerings. So there's a deep integration between Coinbase and Aerodrome. I thought it was coming with the new platform, but it's already here. So I just found this interesting that potentially there could be a forex market coming. If there's because there's liquidity pools for these foreign currencies, then potentially you could trade on Coinbase, and I think you already can. There's stocks on Coinbase. I've just signed up for that. There's currencies. You can trade currencies. There's a lot of different different types of investing that you can do, not just crypto on Coinbase. So, and again, Aerodrome is as of right now, it is the underlying liquidity layer for that, and Morpho is the underlying borrowing and lending liquidity on Coinbase. So this is what we've been talking about on this show for a long time. Is that I just see, and that's one of the reasons that I'm not saying go buy Aerodrome or Morpho or anything like that, but that is why I'm so bullish on a lot of these projects, because I see Coinbase, love them or hate them, I see them making all the right moves, and what I call, and is known by the term used by everybody, is they are removing the barriers to entry. So the barriers for most people to get involved in crypto and DeFi and things like that is knowledge, and that's what we try to teach here, in DeFi University and on the show, is teach people how to navigate the crypto, the current ecosystem of crypto and DeFi, where you got to use wallets and swaps and
There's
all.
a lot. It is not straightforward, man, at all.
And there's a lot of mistakes you can make and a lot of money you can lose, not even in an investment, sending it to the wrong address, through exploits. There's this freaking minefield that you have to navigate. But with what Coinbase is doing, they are removing all of those barriers to entry. You can onboard dirty fiat onto Coinbase.
Filthy fiat.
Filthy fiat. It's a dirty, dirty boy. And you can earn like 4% just by holding a USDC stablecoin. So it's like a high interest or high yield savings account. And you can stop there if you want. Or you can lend it out and earn yield. Or you can put it in a liquidity pool and earn yield. Or you can invest in stocks.
Liquidity.
And your forex markets, and all of it is on the Coinbase platform. You don't have to mess with wallets and swapping and doing bridging or any of that. It's all done with a couple of clicks automatically for you in the background. And that's what the new Aerodrome platform is going to do. Is it's going to automate a lot of those processes and make it more efficient as well as build in guardrails so that you don't fall victim to what that one individual did, where they lost millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars, due to that sandwich attack, due to slippage.
So I think that one, Mike, I think that you're referring to the swap, the $50 million swap on Aave.
I am.
That one was kind of interesting because there were multiple systems on Aave that failed all at once. And it looked, and because it happened from a cell phone, the swap was executed on a hot wallet on a cell phone.
Holy shit. That much money on like you were doing that freaking on a cell phone?
Yeah. So it looked to me like either the DeFi operator was just moving way too fast and did not see the slippage warning and executed the swap anyway and lost $50 million. Yeah. Either that was that was a possibility, or it could have been that it was some type of very sophisticated money laundering scheme where they use a sandwich attack in order to launder about $35 million. That was it could have been that, but no evidence to say that. Just a very suspicious. We'll put it that way. Suspicious. Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, so Mr. The Creek, welcome to the show. It's the first time I've seen your name. You've been dropping some really good comments but and some of them, I don't necessarily agree with, but we encourage that here. We freaking genuinely love it when people
100%, 100%. I love when someone disagrees, respectfully.
yeah,
I really like that. Yeah.
yeah. And we're not gonna, we don't shout people down, and I mean we'll address your question. So so Coinbase holds your wealth versus you holding your wealth, and then you put why the f would you want to hold on Coinbase? I agree personally, but 95% of people out there don't have the time or even care to learn about decentralized finance. It's just a reality. People just want to click and forget. They don't want to mess with wallets and self custody and the risks involved, or they just don't even know it exists. So this is what I'm talking about: is Coinbase is removing the barriers to entry to where people don't have to do that stuff. A lot of people just want, I mean, that's why people use bank accounts and they don't, keep cash in a safe, or, they don't keep, gold or silver in a safe, throughout history. And, for their daily purchases. And then they have to go and they have to, sell some of it to pay their power bill and, that sort of thing. It's, most people don't want to have to mess with all of the hoops you have to jump through for DeFi and crypto in those wallets. So yeah, there's a lot of people that are going to be 100% okay with keeping their liquidita on Coinbase. And and if it offers some kind of insurance in the future, like an FDIC insurance, that's going to make them feel warm and fuzzy. And if they can earn more in yield by just holding USDC there than in a bank account, to them, I mean that's going to get them all antsy in the pantsy. And then they're going to start looking at some of the other offerings.
So
It's just, it's
Mike,
just a reality.
you're right. I can't disagree with what you're saying, but
Mhm.
for me, that's not the way that I operate and
That's
live.
the key. Is
You know,
it's not for you.
Yeah, it's not for me, but I think it is for many people because I think most people aren't good with having responsibility.
Yeah.
Like if you are responsible for custodying your own assets and something goes wrong, that's on you. It's really up to you at the end of the day if you custody your own assets. But if you're using Coinbase to custody your assets, well, Coinbase is just a bank. That's all they are now. You might
That
call
well,
it a
they're fast becoming one, because I mean it's an exchange right now. In the chat, they're making comments about that. That it's an exchange, not a bank, but they are making all the moves to become a bank. It's, I mean, look at the licenses that they're trying to get, some of which have been approved already. They are moving to become a bank. That's why they're being, a lot of them are, starting to be called neo banks and things like that.
Yeah, so I see in the chat there, Ellie is talking about, is it better to have assets on EtherFi maybe? Well, I would say yes, simply because when you have assets on EtherFi, your assets are on a Gnosis safe wallet. So
Mhm.
that's just a multi-sig wallet. And now that is managed by EtherFi.
Mhm.
So you don't have self-custody in the same way that you would if you were holding assets in your wallet or in your hardware wallet or wherever you custody those assets. But I think that it's still better to have it on EtherFi than it is to have it on something like Coinbase. Um, one of,
Ultimately,
yeah,
you want non-custodial. Ultimately, you want to
right.
hold it in cold storage, or you want non-custodial so that you control the keys. Not your keys, not your crypto. That's that's what I do personally, or what I prefer to do personally for any decent amount of money that isn't actively being earning yield or something like that. But again, the majority of people out there, especially older people, I have grandparents that are in their 90s, and they're still investing in bonds. They have their basically their retirement in bonds and stuff like that. Earning 4%, and I've been trying to tell them you can earn 10% and stay in U.S. dollars, USDC, and they just it doesn't even register for them. So you start talking about, hey, you can on ramp your money into USDC on Coinbase, and then you can transfer it, over here using this, but be careful because you might lose it all. Their head's going to explode. So being able to deposit it on Coinbase is going to be, and places like Coinbase is going to be what the majority of people are going to use in the future. It's just
So you know what's so interesting to me, Mike, about what you're sharing here on the screen on X about all these different filthy fiat currencies that have become digital assets. I really like the fact that I think that a lot of these currencies are going to become composable on money markets, DeFi money markets. So what in the world does all that mean? Well, it means that if I go to a money market like Aave, as I've been showing Ellie how to do, we were operating on a money market, I think, just this past Tuesday. I walked her through how to supply digital assets as collateral and how to borrow them on Aave. Now, imagine, so we just walked through how to do that with Bitcoin and with stable coins. But imagine if you could supply Bitcoin on Aave and then borrow yen against it.
Yeah.
That would be really, really cool, because then you would be levered long in yen terms. Imagine if you could borrow some other, shitcoin fiat against it. You can get that's basically what these are. Like, you've really got to start to think about these fiat currencies as like government issued shitcoins.
Yeah.
Like, if you think of them that way, that's the right way to think of them, because that's what they are.
Well, they're even worse because I mean, at least with shit coins, with meme coins and stuff, there's a chance that that they're going to pump. I guarantee you that fiats aren't going to be pumping anytime.
That is so funny, man. That is
Yeah,
so funny. Yeah, there will be no pumping from
yeah.
the yen. No
No,
way.
it's. I mean, have you ever seen like a fiat pump? It's like
Well, I mean,
all of them just slowly freaking grind down
so they can pump against each other,
against
so
each
that right, right. But at the end of the day, give it a long enough period of time, all they do is go down. You know, it's kind of like on Zero Hedge, Tyler Durden, given a long enough period of time, the survival rate for everyone goes to zero. Well, given a long enough period of time, the survival rate of every fiat currency is zero. These things devolve and blow up over time. And we've seen that with the US dollar and with every other fiat currency since 2020. The the operation that was done in 2020, that what the Fed did, printing $4 trillion over the course of 18 months, and then just distributing all that money to people as they were forced to stay home, and not even forced to stay home. It was a mandate. There was no law. People just decided to comply.
yeah.
But that money printing operation destroyed the dollar, and there's no coming back. And the next money printing operation that the Fed engages in will be the death knell for the middle class and anyone in the lower class, because it will be impossible for you to get ahead after this next money printing operation. It's already impossible, but it will be made even more difficult. And it's simply because we operate on this monetary system that is fundamentally broken. The US Treasury system is broken. The US dollar is broken. And the only thing that fixes this is digital assets. And really, I think Bitcoin fixes a lot of this. But the problem with Bitcoin is that it's still super new and it's not very useful yet. And like, we need a treasury asset that is useful, that has real utility. And Bitcoin simply doesn't right now. And the reason why it doesn't is because there's nothing real that's been built on top of it yet. So, I was at an in-person, meetup, a Bitcoin meetup earlier this week in St. Petersburg, Florida, and learning about Fedi. Fedi is it's a basically like a quasi custodial Bitcoin wallet. That's kind of, it's a Lightning wallet. And the problem with this FEDI protocol is that it is ridiculously complicated to use. So all of the stuff on top of Bitcoin that's been built on top of Bitcoin, it needs to be, number one, very useful. It needs to drive transaction volume on the Bitcoin mainnet, and it needs to be stupid easy to onboard into. Otherwise, people won't be able to figure out how to use it. It's got to literally be like one click onboarding. In the absence of that, I think Bitcoin could actually die. Like Bitcoin has a problem with, this halving, and miners need to be incentivized to keep their machines on. So if there's not more transaction volume on the Bitcoin mainnet, then I think you could get into the situation after, another 4 or 8 years, another 1 or 2 halving cycles, where miners are disincentivized from having their machines running. So yeah, we really, really need people to build on Bitcoin. Now, people are building on Ethereum, and that's great. That's really great. But Ethereum has this foundation that basically exerts control over the protocol. They manage this protocol. I prefer the more decentralized nature of Bitcoin to the more centralized control structure of Ethereum. But Ethereum is still great. And I see Mr. The Creek says, "Oh, damn, David, you just lost me." I don't think that Bitcoin, look, I don't want Bitcoin to die, obviously. But I'm just saying, this is a technology that is, fewer than 2 decades old. Okay. And it's
Well,
just,
Mr. Creek needs to explain what he's trying to say a little better, because yeah, we are fully aware that Bitcoin and ETH are 2 different protocols. That's kind of what he's explaining. Is so if you could please clarify, because I definitely want to understand what it is that you're trying to say. But go ahead, David.
yeah, no, it's all good. Yeah, I was just comparing the 2 top, crypto or digital asset,
Yeah,
comparing Bitcoin and ETH. And, look, you can build on top of Bitcoin. That is absolutely possible. Um, and he's saying here, you can't have ETH without Bitcoin. Uh, that I don't agree with that. I
not
think
at
that
all. Yeah,
I think that Ethereum as a smart contract platform could survive even if Bitcoin does not. Now, my preference would be for Bitcoin to become the monetary asset for the world, the treasury asset for the world, because that way, you don't have a centralized power that can simply print more of it in order to finance endless war, or in order to finance, some type of fraud scheme to import, invaders from God knows where. So yeah, man, I mean, I would prefer Bitcoin to be the treasury asset for the world, but it's just, people need to use it. It's not digital gold. It's simply not.
yeah. No,
Yeah.
it's all about adoption. It's software. Yeah, I mean, it's and with any software, its value is directly proportional to adoption.
Yeah, I would say so. And number one, Bitcoin is very decentralized, but it's not digital gold. And if people think that they can just buy it and hold it as if it were gold and do nothing with the network and never transact except to sell for fiat, that model I don't think will work. There needs to be a real use case for Bitcoin. Now, the layer twos are trying to solve for that. You've got Lightning, which enables, instantaneous and nearly free micropayments and macro payments too. But Lightning is great because you can actually build on top of Lightning. So you can build, clients on top of Lightning. Those clients are essentially your app. So your app can be anything you can dream up. You can build on top of Lightning. But people really haven't done that yet because it is very difficult to build on top of Bitcoin compared to writing a smart contract on Ethereum. Like writing smart contracts on ETH and stitching those contracts together to build a protocol, that is like stupid simple, compared to building on Bitcoin and Lightning?
Well, and it kind of goes back to what I was talking about earlier with, people tend to gravitate, and institutions included, the path of least resistance. What is going to be the cheapest to build on? What's going to be the easiest to build on? Ethereum over Bitcoin. Which one, potentially could they, influence more? Bitcoin being, decentralized, they don't have the power and influence. But with Ethereum, there are levers they can pull and influence that they can exert to nudge the ETH mainnet and how it's developed and how it's built, how it's built out, and things like that, because there's a team of developers that are constantly working on upgrading the network. So it's there's a lot of layers you got to peel back whenever you're thinking about these different projects, and kind of the future of this tech and where it's going, and which ones are going to be the ones that that win in the end.
Yeah, so I see something interesting here. Mr. Creek saying, with gold, how do you determine quantities to determine supply and demand? So what I think about with all of these commodities is, what is the denominator? These commodities are, the unit of account is always the US dollar. So supply and demand may actually be less important than the declining value of the denominator of that unit of account.
Well, yeah, in dollar terms, that's why the price of gold keeps going up, is because the value of the dollar keeps going down, not necessarily the supply that's in circulation, because there's always more supply coming, being mined and stuff. Depending on the price, they ramp up or slow down operations based off that. But as long as it's profitable, they're going to keep pulling it out of the ground. And at some point with SpaceX, I would dare say they're going to be mining it off asteroids. So what David's saying is, I would tend to agree with, is a lot of it has more to do with the denominator, which is how is it valued in US dollars.
Right, right. And that's the problem, because if you value everything in a government shitcoin, then everything is going to inflate over time, because that's a feature of these fiat currencies, not a bug. The inflation is a feature. Mike, I don't know if maybe we can find it, but there's a clip of Jerome Powell, J Powell, as you call him. He's giving some press conference, and I think a senator is asking him, like, can you explain to us why it is that this 2% inflation rate is the target for the Fed? Like, why exactly did you choose 2% inflation? Why is inflation good? Can you explain this to us? And his answer was basically, well, I mean, all the central banks do it. It's like, it's just what they do. Is 2% is good. That was his answer. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm not even kidding, man. It was that stupid. And it just makes me think, like, dude, like, we live in this monetary system that is completely arbitrary and made up. And it's
all manipulated.
It's completely made up, man. And when I think about something like the US dollar and the US Treasury system, this is a system based on belief. So you have to believe that the dollar has value in order to be able to transact with it. And everyone has to share that belief. So, if you go through all of the, free of charge educational material at the node.pro, what you'll learn is that the history of money is actually quite long and quite complex, but it's based on belief. It's always been based on belief. So whether you believe that the US Treasury asset is a store of value, or you believe that a big rock is a store of value, if that belief is shared amongst a large enough group of people, then you can create a monetary system around that belief. It all comes down to belief. And so I think if people were to build on top of Bitcoin and replace all of these financial products with financial products built on top of Bitcoin, and enough people started to get onboarded and believe that Bitcoin is the superior monetary asset for the world, then guess what? The entire world would start using it as such. It just comes down to belief and shared belief. That's really what money is.
Oh no, it 100% is. The only reason people accept U.S. dollars is because they believe that they can take that money and they can go give it to somebody else that is going to give them goods or services. That's it. I mean, there's nothing backing it besides U.S. debt. The
Yeah.
days being backed by gold is long gone. So let's go over this. I want you to kind of
Here,
smell.
Mike, give me 5 seconds. I'm going to grab some more coffee.
Yeah, no worries. So let's go through some of the comments here. Let's see. What do we got here? What happens with technology can remove or add a proton element? And I mean that obviously if they find some way to make artificial gold, kind of like they make artificial diamonds, obviously that's going to affect the value of it. But um, let's see. So looks like David's sitting back down, putting his headphones on. So let's start going through this. So this is the World Liberty Fi news. So basically, this person is this is their version of events. Be U.S. president, launch World Liberty Fi, keep your family in the team, conduct a pre-sale, raise $590 million from public and private investors, blacklist high-profile investors' wallets, prevent majority of people from selling, through locks. Don't, and also what he just did, where they used a bunch of World Liberty Fi token to take out a loan against, which maxed out the what is it? It's called basically whenever they maxed out the liquidity pool to where nobody could withdraw their liquidity. So prevent the majority of people from selling. Dump the token nonstop. Keep your friend as the CEO of World Liberty Fi. The friend must also be the founder of Dolomite, who they took the loan out through. Deposit 5% of World Liberty Fi supply into Dolomite. Borrow USDC and USD1, which is their stable coin. Add more rewards to increase the pool supply. Drain the USD1 lending pool to 100% utilization. That's what I was talking about. It's at 100% utilization, so it traps the depositors and spikes the rates. Send the borrowed funds to Coinbase Prime. FUD started, token price goes down. So kind of see, can you deconstruct this for us, David, and kind of explain to us what was the thinking behind World Liberty Fi and Trump doing this? What's the end game here?
So, number one, the president of the United States does not have direct control over this particular project, World Liberty Fi. His family does. Okay.
Let's be real though.
So I just wanna say, like,
he has his son. All of his sons are like in the key positions. His buddy, is looks like he's the CTO and the founder of Dolomite, where he took it, out from. It's like saying Nancy Pelosi isn't the one that's doing the investing, and that it's her husband.
I agree with you. I'm in agreement. I just wanted to say, hey, it's not him directly; it's his family, but kind of, sort of the same thing, right?
Officially, it's not him. You are correct.
So, look, man, it's a challenge for me because I love what President Trump is doing to help restore America.
Absolutely.
But he's not doing enough. He needs to do more.
Yeah.
And also at the same time, dude has a history of being a scammer, bro.
Yeah,
like he does. He just kind of does.
Yeah.
So like, as much as I love what he's doing for America culturally, and on the world stage, I also think that, hey, like, dude launched a fucking meme coin, bro. Like, the Trump coin, that was a straight up scam. And
sucked billions of liquidity out of the markets when it was just starting to take off, when we were just starting to get a bull run.
And it's really gross. It's really gross that he did that in the first place. He didn't need to do that. There was no reason to do that. It was just looked like a cash grab to me. Um, so that was a real shame. But when we take a look at this WLFI project, this is also some type of scam too. It certainly looks as though it is. Um, because what exactly does this token do? Like, why in the world should you swap into WLFI? There's no reason to do so.
No.
And if you take a look at a guy like Justin Sun, can you imagine being a high-profile crypto investor, a crypto billionaire, and buying millions of these or getting allocated millions of these WLFI tokens, and then getting your fucking wallet blacklisted so you can't sell? Like, dude, that's crazy. That's crazy. But what they're doing in DeFi on Dolomite, that's pretty horrible too. I mean, maxing out a pool, to 100% utilization so that other depositors can't withdraw assets, all of these negative liquidity events. It's just, there's, it's not a good look. It's really not a good look. And it doesn't have to be this way. The guys who are managing this it looks as though they're managing this thing into the ground, and they're just looking to dump it on unsuspecting retail.
Yeah.
So I would stay far, far away from WLFI. I would stay far, far away from USD1. I would stay far away from any protocol that has exposure to these assets, because if these digital assets blow up at some point, more than they already have. I mean, if I just take a look at the WLFI token, we're talking about like the shittiest of the shitters here. And unfortunately, it's got this, presidential backing simply because it's created by, President Trump's family and managed by his family. But like this thing at 8 cents,
You want to
there's no
share?
sure, yeah, there's no reason why this thing can't go to, fractions of a penny.
Well,
Like,
real quick, while you bring that up, David, what David said is that Trump is, doing good things. He's not saying that, overall he's the best thing for America. It's just out of the choices that we had, he's doing things that are more pro-America and that are better for Americans than the past administration was doing. So by far, he's not the best person for the job, I feel, but he's the best that we had, and he is, like securing the borders, a lot of the tariffs, evening the playing field. A lot of the moves that he's doing is, influencing businesses to bring manufacturing and jobs, back to the U.S. by basically making it less profitable for them to outsource or send jobs manufacturing overseas, using tariffs. There's a lot of levers that he's pulling to try to make America better. If if you
yeah,
like Trump or not, you got to separate that from
look at what a BTC mouse said. Newsom's wife is our last hope. Oh my god, dude! Did you see her speaking? Like, can you imagine being in the same room as that woman and having to listen to her speak? Like,
oh,
bro, I can't do it. I couldn't do it.
this,
Um,
you've addressed this before because this is a common misconception that that we the people pay for tariffs, and I know what he's saying, and it's a very parroted
This,
narrative.
this is interesting. Let's talk about the tariffs for a second,
Yeah.
because there's a big difference between what you read in a textbook and
Yes.
how things actually work in real life. So
Absolutely.
when you read about tariffs in a textbook, what you'll learn, maybe you got to go to the Leering Center to learn more. But when you read about tariffs in a textbook, what you're going to find is that the importers that are importing goods pay that tariff, and it
Yeah.
amounts to a tax on those people importing goods. Now, here's the way it works in practice in real life. In this world that we live in, the US Treasury asset is the world's global reserve asset. And that means that the United States is the largest and most valuable market for manufacturers globally to export their products into. What that means is that they need access to this American market. And so if America decides, hey, you know what? We're going to slap a tariff on your goods. The importers pay the tariff, but if the exporters are forced to lower their prices in order to retain access to the US market, then who ends up actually eating that tariff? It's not the American people, because we're not seeing inflation feed through from these tariffs. We just haven't seen that. All these people that were out there wringing their hands saying, hey, we're going to get inflation through the roof because of these tariffs. It didn't happen, and it won't happen because of the power of the United States market. The exporters need to be able to sell products into the US market and receive dollars. And so that means.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
So what that means is they are forced to lower their prices and eat those tariffs, even if importers are paying them. If they're buying a good that is lower in US dollar price to compensate for that tariff, then who's actually eating the tariff? It's the exporters that are actually eating it. And it's reducing.
And not to mention, if manufacturing, as manufacturing comes back to the US, there is no tariffs on US produced goods. So if Americans buy American made products, then they can charge lower prices and potentially have a better quality product.
100%, and so in the chat's really active, man. This is great.
Yeah.
So, and Mr. The Creek is saying the consumer eats the tariff 100%. But unfortunately, Mr. The Creek is incorrect in saying that. That has not been the case. That is not what we're seeing. And inflation has not been a result of these tariffs. So what
inflation is a result of them printing fucking money like out of control. That's what that whole debacle is.
So what we're actually seeing in practice is the trade deficit shrinking massively. That's what we're seeing as a result of these tariffs. And I got to say, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, he's a brilliant guy. He's very, very smart. And they've been able to engineer these tariffs to significantly reduce the US trade deficit, which needs to happen. President Trump is doing a lot of things that we should have done decades ago.
Yeah.
But the thing that's most important for me is deporting all of these millions of third world invaders. And he's doing that, but he's not doing enough of it. He's not doing enough. He needs to hire another 100,000 ICE agents to really go after and deport illegal alien invaders. That needs to happen more. But no, unfortunately, when it comes to the tariffs, Mr. The Creek is incorrect. The consumer does not pay the tariff simply because we have.
And I don't think he's necessarily processing what you're saying, because it says no company on earth will swallow the tariffs. David explained how they have to, because if they want to stay competitive, they have to keep their prices, competitive, and so they can't just jack up their prices, on their goods, or people will just stop buying them. So they have to find a way to stay competitive. And so, like say if China has 100% tariff, and say Mexico has a 10% tariff, and they're making the same product, they have to stay competitive with Mexico. So they can't just raise their prices and make the consumer pay that. They would have to lower their price to be competitive with the Mexico one, or go out of business.
So here's the thing. Imagine, Mike, I'm an importer in the United States, and you are a manufacturer in Japan. Let's say you manufacture vehicles, you manufacture cars.
Okay.
And the president of the United States slaps a tariff on the cars that you manufacture of 50%. Okay. But you need access to the American market. You have no choice but to continue to export your vehicles into the US market. And importers want to continue to buy your products, but the importers now have to pay this tariff, which amounts to a tax. So importers suddenly have to pay this massive tariff. Well, importers are not going to continue to buy and import your vehicles if they have to pay that tax. So, as long as those exporters need access to the US market, what has been happening in practice is those exporters have been slashing their prices by an amount equivalent to the tariff. And so, who actually ends up eating that tariff at the end of the day?
Or the exporter.
The exporters are.
Yeah.
So even though in textbooks you'll read that, hey, you know what? Tariffs are a tax paid by importers. Although that is true, if the price of that imported good is cut by an amount equivalent to the tariff, who ends up eating the tariff? The exporter does. And yeah,
Well,
that
let's
has the effect of reducing the trade deficit.
yeah, we only got
And
about 50 minutes left. I don't want to get too bogged down on a rabbit trail. I think that we've explained quite a bit, and people can play back and hear and break it down and fact check it and all that. So I definitely appreciate the comments though. It's
that's
again,
great.
we definitely love this back and forth. All right, so let's go to. Let's see. Let me scroll out here.
And Mr. The Greek says, I make no sense. Oh, dude, this is great, man. I love this. I love seeing this stuff in the chat.
Well, you were going to break down this chart. What was it that you were wanting to do on the chart?
Oh, yeah. So this here, this is just crude. This is just a chart of crude oil. So this is the WTI contract. This is the West Texas Intermediate contract. And, here's the thing. What we've got going on is here's the high. Here's a lower high. So, but we've also got a series of higher lows here. And now the problem is that even if the Strait of Hormuz becomes passable, all of those producing countries in that region, many of them have, facilities that have been shut in. Okay, so they've been forced to curtail a lot of production there as a result of Iran launching missiles and drones at their production facilities. So if they're forced to stop producing and the Strait of Hormuz is not passable, then the only reaction function for crude must be number go up. That doesn't necessarily mean it has to go back above 120, but just staying elevated above, $80 or $90, that will feed through to inflation. So this is what we have to worry about here. The price of energy remaining elevated. And we got an inflation read today. And that inflation read was not good. Inflation really ripped higher. That was expected. The expectation was for inflation to push higher. But here's the problem. Imagine we get another bout of inflation, just like what happened in the 1970s. I don't think that that's likely. The reason why I don't think that's likely is because the core difference between the 1970s double dip inflation and today is that back then, when Iran, was a problem in the 70s, just like it is today, we didn't have the crude oil, production capacity in the United States in 1970 that we have today. So America is the single largest producer of oil globally today. So we have that going for us now, and we did not have that back in the 70s. And so all of these fuel lines that you saw in the 70s and that you're seeing in other countries, many Southeast Asian countries, we're not going to see that here in America today because we produce more crude than anywhere else in the world. And that wasn't the case in the 70s. So my expectation is that over time, the price of oil will return to, $60 or $70. And you can actually see that, Mike, if you take a look at the futures forward curve that I was, trying to, just walk Ellie through a little bit yesterday. And honestly, man, like that is a really complex concept to start someone off with, when you're first learning about futures. But unfortunately, like, even though it's super complex, that's where you got to start. That's the foundation. You got to start by learning about forward curves. So what the forward curve is telling us is that the market believes the price of crude in the future will be significantly lower than what it is today. The curve is in a state of backwardation. So the expectation for market participants is that crude oil will return to like $70
Hmm.
over the next 12 months. So, yeah, I don't think that we're going to get another bout of inflation unless there is some other shock that happens. Um, so, basically, if the Fed decides that they want to print, if they want to go into another money printing operation, that could drive another bout of inflation. And they would just lie to us about it, just like we've been lied to already with the way that the CPI numbers are calculated. I think it's just a lie. And the way that you know it's a lie is you can just go to the grocery store and buy milk or buy eggs and then ask yourself in 2020, how much did this milk and eggs cost me?
Oh yeah, like
And
eggs were like a dozen was under a buck. It was it's anybody that's been an adult for more than a minute knows that groceries are roughly twice as expensive. Gas. I mean everything that our utilities. Everything that we need day to day to maintain our way of life is more expensive.
yeah, yeah. And so there's a difference between absolute asset price inflation and the rate of inflation. You see, I think that's there's a core distinction here that people need to understand. So asset price inflation is one thing, and that doesn't go away. But the rate of inflation, that is what we always see that headline number. Like
Yeah,
today, it was something like 3.0 or 3.1 or something
yeah,
like that. So that is the rate, the inflation rate. How
yeah.
much?
They can always add to. They can't take away. It's just like you're saying. It's how what is the acceleration of inflation? Did it slow down? Did it speed up? But it never goes in reverse.
Right, right. And so that's the problem for people who don't own any assets
Mm.
because the absolute asset price inflation amount, it was like 100% for just about everything.
Well,
Whether that
anything you earn from assets, subtract the inflation, and that's what you actually net. That's what you actually earned or lost. If you're not outpacing it.
Right. So, I mean, if you have dollars and you know that your dollars are inflating away each year to the tune of 3 or 5 or 7%,
Mm.
well, then you're losing that purchasing power at that rate each year. So if you take those dollars and you invest them in the S&P 500,
Mm.
and the S&P, has an average return of like 12% or something. So, okay, you think, oh, great, I'm making 12% per year, over the course of the next 30 years.
Subtract
Awesome.
inflation.
But then you got to think about the inflation because
Yeah.
like, the S&P, the denominator is the dollar. So if the S&P is up by 12%, but the denominator is down by 7% each year or 3% each year or whatever it is, how much were you actually making? How much were you actually making? It's the return minus the rate of inflation.
Yeah. So
So
if you made 12 but you lost 7, you made 5. So you actually made 5%, which at least it's positive. But that can always go the other direction, depending on how high inflation is and how much yield that you're making.
yeah, yeah. So that's something that's important to understand. But also the reason why it's never going back to the way it was in 2020 in terms of prices is because the absolute price inflation, that is like a one-time thing that doesn't go back. The only way that that goes back is during a deflationary shock. And so that is what everyone and their mother wants to avoid like the plague, because a deflationary shock means market crash.
Mhm.
That's what that means. So, they will do everything in their power, the powers that be, to keep that from happening. And what's their plan? Well, we know what the plan is. The plan is more. That's the plan. It's always been the plan.
Yeah.
It's just more. Let's just print more.
Yeah.
And so that's going to expand the monetary supply even further. That means more inflation. So it's just a matter of waiting for that next shock. And it would probably start in the bond market with private credit blowing up. That would feed through into equity prices, and that would force the Fed to print again. And when they start printing, that's when okay, time to go all in on Bitcoin and maybe some shitters like ETH. And if you can pick up Sol for less than $30 at some point this year, maybe pick up some of that. So we're getting close. This year, I think we're going to have a great opportunity during this Bitcoin bear to pick up some Bitcoin and some other digital assets on sale. And this is when you make the money. You make your money on the buy. And so that means you've got to get a good entry. Okay. So yeah, it's really important just to be patient. And this pattern that we see playing out here in Bitcoin right now, this is a textbook bear flag. We've actually got two of them, and just waiting for this bear flag to confirm so that I can make some money on my shorts, number one, but also so that over the next 6 or 8 months, so that I have an opportunity to pick up some Bitcoin, I think for well below $50,000. So if this bear cycle in Bitcoin is like all the rest of the Bitcoin bears, then what we should expect is a drawdown from the all-time high of around 70%, or maybe a little bit more than that. So if we see a 75% drawdown from the all-time high, that would bring Bitcoin into the low 30s, which would make a lot of sense when it comes to the Bitcoin cycle. So this, to me, looks like a reasonable target on the downside for Bitcoin this year, over the next 8 months. Now, the Bitcoin cycle tells us that we should expect Bitcoin to have made a trough, to have put in a low by October 5th of this year. That is the expectation according to the cycle. Now, will it play out according to the cycle? Well, until proven otherwise, I don't think that this time is going to be any different. Whenever someone says, this time is different, I don't believe it. I don't believe it. I think that the pattern will simply continue to repeat. But yeah, my expectation here is BTC down below 50K at the very least. I expect these lows here, those August 2024 lows, I expect those to get broken on the downside. My expectation also is that just like most other Bitcoin bear cycles, bear markets, I expect that we're going to see the 200-week moving average fail and be broken to the downside. So that means we get an opportunity to buy some Bitcoin, number one, down here around those August 2024 lows, but likely we get an opportunity to buy Bitcoin even lower than that, well into the 40s and into the 30s even possibly. So that's what I'm thinking. And now what would be the catalyst to push BTC lower like this? Well, number one, there is a cycle, and just belief in that cycle is enough. But number two, there are some really serious problems in private credit right now. And if there's contagion there, it could be the type of event that pushes the S&P quite a bit lower. I mean, look at the size of this bounce here. This has been a massive headline-driven bounce out of the S&P over the last 2 weeks here. So big bounce out of the S&P. But just because we got this small correction and big bounce, driven mainly, I think, by headlines, does that mean that all of the problems are just suddenly fixed and everything is right with the world? And, crude is flowing through the Strait of Hormuz again, and oil price has collapsed? None of those things are true. So all of this bounce that we've seen out of the S&P, it looks like headline-driven, macro bounce here. That's the way it looks to me. And so we'll see how things play out. But my expectation is that we get an opportunity this year to buy Bitcoin much more cheaply than the current prices. So I am a bear during the Bitcoin bear market. And Not Scoot Boy is asking about ETH at $700. I don't think we're going to get ETH at 700, but look, I don't have a crystal ball, obviously. What I do see here, however, is my expectation for alts is that we get an opportunity to buy some of the best altcoins like Ethereum. We get an opportunity to buy them at or below their bear market lows from last bear. So for ETH, that would mean ETH down here around $1,000. So think about this.
There we go. I can see the picture now. Sorry, it's not a guy with a mustache. It's Ellie with her little onesie on.
Oh yeah, no, I couldn't quite tell what that was.
She
Now I
runs
can see
a
it.
little Pikachu outfit, but yeah. All right, yeah, I see it now. Sorry. All right.
No, all good, all good. Yeah, I couldn't quite tell, but now I can see it. So yeah, just looking here at ETH, like here's the thing, you need to view these alts through the lens of Bitcoin. So if Bitcoin breaks its 200-week moving average and moves back down to its lows from August of 2024, if that happens, what
Mm,
does that mean for altcoins? That means altcoins would get slaughtered even more than they already have.
mm,
So that means you get a move down below 1600 on ETH and likely down to its bear market lows from last bear.
mm.
So, I've been talking about this for months now, and it's just a matter of allowing this to play out. So,
I'm up to
yeah,
3,000 in dry powder for I'm just waiting for the dip.
yeah, man. Yeah, I mean, it's just a matter of being patient, I think.
Mm.
So, and that's hard. That's really hard.
I'm just sitting on my hands. I'm in no rush. If it and if I miss out, if like everything pumps, I still have
Plus,
exposure. Thank you. I still have exposure, to key assets that I'm bullish on, and like I said, it's 3,000. I'd love to buy some stuff lower, but if it, if it materializes, awesome. If it doesn't, that's okay too.
yeah, so here I see in the chat, talking about the XR apocalypse, the XRP apocalypse. I mean, dude, it's about time. It's time for this thing to, and not just XRP,
Dude,
but
I sold my XRP at $2. I had over 40,000 XRP with an average buy price of around like 32 cents. So as soon as it hit $2, I was like, I'm out.
ah,
It's it was a good profit. Did I get the top? No. Did I make did I make money? Yes. And fundamentally, I saw way too many issues with XRP.
yeah, but it's not just XRP though. There's a lot of
Oh,
scam bullshit projects in crypto
absolutely.
still. Yeah. It's just that XRP is the largest of them. And the bigger problem with XRP is all of the influencers out there that shill this thing. And I'm
Well,
assuming that they are paid. They've got to be paid, right?
either that, either directly or indirectly. And I think a lot of them, it's more indirect. They just know that if they talk about XRP, that they get clicks, they get views, and they get paid by YouTube, based off of how many eyeballs they get. And that's how they make a lot of their money is off of viewers. So you're right. I mean, there could be people out there that are getting paid directly, but I think mostly it's indirectly, that they're just basically eyeball whores. They'll do say and do whatever to get people to watch their content, and that's all they care about. And
Yeah.
whatever the hot mind share is, or the hot topic or trending narrative is, they're going to talk about it, and just to get the engagement. That's not how we operate here. We're here to actually educate. We're not here to hype. We're going to tell you the good and the bad about everything. Like Trump, we were just I'm a Trump supporter, for the most part. There's things I don't agree with, but I think net he's doing a lot more positive than negative. But we're going to point out, I think he's shit for crypto. Other than the fact that he's a lot better than if we had Harris. But we got the Genius Act. They're trying to get the Clarity Act through. There's some legislation going on. I think, but ignoring the shit show of Trump, the Trump token and the Melania token and what he's doing with World Liberty Fi, we're going to point that shit out.
100%. 100%. We
Sorry,
have to. We have to, and so but it's not just XRP isn't the only crypto scam. So if you take a look just down the top 100, okay, XRP simply is the largest crypto scam, sitting at $83 billion market cap. That's insane. Insane.
For what?
For nothing. For nothing. For nothing. Nothing at all.
And the XRPL is it's actually contracting when it comes to use and fees and all of that. I do not see from a traditional standpoint of trying to, if XRP was a security, if it was a stock and it was tied to the valuation of the company, I don't see where any value is.
I don't see any value being created there at all. But it's not just them. You take a look down the list and Cardano. Can anyone in the chat describe to me what Cardano actually does?
Or anybody that's actively building on it, or any revenue that is being generated outside of staking, ADM.
Right. What exactly does that one do again? Nothing. And then you got something like Bitcoin Cash. Why?
Like
why?
Yeah.
And then you go down the list here, XLM, another nonsense.
It's basically XRP. It was created by what's his name that left XRP or left.
And then you got Litecoin. Why exactly does this still exist and have a $4 billion market cap? HBAR, Hedera, nonsense. You got a couple meme coins like Shiba Inu and Doge, which are just basically valueless, completely valueless.
Basically Pokemon cards.
Right. And then you still got something like Polkadot with a 2-point-something billion market cap. This is one of those dinosaur coins that hopefully over time crypto will be purged of these protocols and coins that have massive market caps for nothing. We need it for crypto to survive and thrive. I think what we really need is for these coins and these projects to actually provide value. You've got to solve real problems and provide real value to people. Otherwise, what exactly is it aside from some type of a scam? If you can buy a token for one reason and one reason only, and that is you think you can sell it tomorrow for more to someone else.
Yeah.
Well, that's not value. That's not value.
No.
That's some type of a Ponzi scheme. So yeah, I would just.
And Ellie talks about that she has a Charizard card worth over 500. And I don't doubt that, because there's people that collect them, through nostalgia or whatever, just like baseball cards and football cards and stuff like that, or memorabilia, signed jerseys and things, that people want to get, or maybe like a signed a boxing glove for Mike Tyson. There's no real value to it other than the perceived value. It's same thing as fiat, the perceived value of, what that is. And that's kind of the point that we're trying to make, is that a lot of these are just perceived value based off of hype, based off of, ignorance of tokenomics, all of those things. And that's why we're trying to educate you all and nudge you towards, looking at these projects like an actual business investment, to where you look at the underlying company and what pain point are, like David said earlier, what pain point are they addressing? What problem are they trying to solve? That's what a pain point is. And by providing that service, what revenue are they generating? And then on top of that, because there needs to be a connection to us, the token holder, because these aren't securities, how does, if at all, does that revenue make its way to token holders, through something in the tokenomics? Because otherwise, if there's a disconnect there, you're holding a Charizard card and hoping that somebody else will pay more than you paid to buy your Charizard card, or XRP.
You know, I've seen grown ass men wait at like Walmarts for
It's
these
fine.
Pokemon cards to like, be restocked.
Yeah.
Um, which, to me, like, I can't tell which is worse. The fact that, people will go out and buy something like XRP, or the fact that people are willing to pay, hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands or sometimes millions of dollars for Pokemon cards.
Oh,
Which,
dude,
which one's
that
worse?
that one just got sold. What are those two brothers that do the boxing? They were social media dudes,
Right.
and
Paul. Yeah. Jake
yeah,
Paul, Logan Paul.
yeah,
Yeah.
Jake Paul. He just auctioned off like a Pokemon card for like I think it was like millions of dollars.
Yeah, I think it was 16 million. You know what that reminds me of? It reminds me of the NFT craze. That's
Yes.
that's what it reminds me of. So, if I had Pokemon cards right now that were worth hundreds or thousands of dollars, um, yeah, I would definitely sell them. I would sell them and I would get cash, and then I would take that cash. I would probably, like buy gold or silver, like
Yeah.
physical gold and silver, you
Yeah.
know? So yeah, it reminds me of the NFT craze. That's what it reminds me of.
That's where the
And
majority of my money is gold and silver.
in
And
NFTs.
yeah, yes, yes, definitely.
Yeah.
I have a Bored Ape, Cyberpunk, yeah. It's I'm big on NFTs.
You're big on NFTs. I got a couple pictures of rocks, but I've
I
got
actually, you know what? I kind of am big on NFTs. My Arrow locks are all NFTs. But that brings me to a quick point is the technology of NFTs I'm bullish on, but NFTs, the little pictures of cartoon monkeys and stuff, I'm not. But the technology behind them I'm bullish on, because that's what makes a lot of DeFi possible. Creating those digital receipts of the information of what you bought, when you bought it, for how much, all of those things, that digital ownership. So yeah, I mean, I'm definitely bullish on the technology of NFTs, just not the cartoons.
Yeah, so this is actually really funny. These guys over at Joma Tech, their channel Joma Tech, hilarious stuff, man. Um, they put out this video, I think it was 4 years ago, where they're making fun of the influencers shilling these NFTs, back in the day, and
Yeah,
also the quote unquote traders buying them. Uh, and this one trader, man, they make fun of this guy. They put up, they're just simulating what it was like back in the day. And this dude buys a left-facing rock NFT picture for like 100 ETH, okay?
oh
Which
good
at,
lord.
at the time was like, $120,000. And it's just, dude, people, it comes down to belief. It comes down to belief.
it,
People
it, it,
believed.
it was all because of hype. That you saw all these celebrities that were buying them, and they were, they had all these, influencers that were pushing them, and they hyped the shit out of them. And and those of you that weren't around, it was the end of the last, real bull market. It was that euphoria at the end. I mean, pretty much anything that was going on in crypto was just pumping. And I mean, you could throw a dart at a wall, and whatever the project was, meme coin or otherwise, vaporware, real, fake. It's just everything was pumping. Metaverse stuff. People, buying digital, property next to Snoop Dogg, and it was ridiculous. People were spending millions and millions of dollars on nothing. And so, yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
And
go ahead.
we didn't get that euphoria this past bull
Not
cycle.
even a little bit.
Well, we never did, and I think that's probably a good thing. That's probably a good thing because all of these like scam vaporware projects, they need to die off for crypto to really mature and move past that. It'll
Yeah.
probably take another couple of years, but
95% of the 45 million, tokens out there need to go away so that that liquidity can actually make its way to real projects. And a lot of this, scamminess and, stigma of, crypto can go away, and, people can start becoming educated on the actual future of the technology and start investing accordingly. Because most people come into crypto during those euphoric stages that me and David are talking about, and they FOMO in to something because it's pumping, because everything's pumping, and they think they're going to get rich overnight, and then the markets crash. They hold on too long. The markets crash. The people that got in first, sucked their liquidity out, just like Trump did with the Trump token.
liquidity.
And that's people's first experience in crypto is they invested money, they watched it pump up, and then they watched it get rugged, and they lost all their money. And so they're like, screw crypto. This is a scam. I'm out.
Yeah. Yeah. And for a lot of crypto projects, it's true. They are basically scams for a lot of them. So yeah, but I think that what you've got to do is just focus on like literally a handful of digital assets. It's basically Bitcoin, Ethereum, and then we got to go down this list here and take a look at something like Hype, where the protocol generates a lot of revenue and returns those revenues to token holders. And then you got to take a look at something like Tron, which has run by 7x this past bull and held on to the gains. So we're literally talking here about like a handful of projects. And then if you want exposure to something that is more TradFi focused, you've got to take a look at Canton, CC. So we're literally talking about 5. We're talking about Bitcoin. We're talking about Ethereum, the smart contract platform. We're talking about Hyperliquid, which is the largest and most successful trading protocol. And then we're talking about Tron, which is a payments-focused layer 1 chain. And then we're talking about something a little bit more institutionally focused, Canton CC. That's 5. That's 5 tokens.
And for me, Aerodrome.
Oh yeah, yeah. So yeah.
That's just for me. That's for me. You guys don't worry about that one.
Yeah. No. Yeah.
Well,
I'm short, Arrow.
Yeah. For the last 20 minutes, let's get into a little bit of education. So there's 4 things that I kind of want to dive into that had to do with the topic for today's show. So, and I'm going to kick these over to you, David. And I'll name them off real quick, and then we'll start with the first one. So the first one is going to be circular dependency, defining circular dependency. The second one's going to be DeFi versus C DeFi or centralized DeFi, and then how to perform due diligence in 2026, and then spotting a regulatory trap. So starting it off, let's talk about and defining circular dependency. So what it's saying here, so let's walk them through why borrowing against your own unissued or illiquid token creates a catastrophic liquidation feedback loop. For example, if the token price drops, you have to sell the token to cover the loan, which drops the price further. Mention historical examples of this failing. So, I mean, is that something that you feel like you can dive into?
100%. Why don't we dive into that in the context of WLFI, World Liberty Financial, and USD1 on Dolomite. So let's talk about that. So, this circular dependency, you could also think of it as like a death loop or so whenever I see, Mike, these flywheels that people talk about, I immediately think, uh-oh, bad. This is bad. Yeah,
Well,
that's
they advertise it as good, and it can be, but it can work against you as well. But go ahead.
right, right. So Arrow is a great example of a flywheel not working. I know that you have a different opinion,
Yeah,
but
go ahead.
so if we talk about World Liberty Financial and USD1, so here's the death loop, here's the doom loop. The action was the World Liberty Financial Treasury deposited a massive amount of WLFI tokens into the lending protocol Dolomite. And then here's the dependency. They then borrowed USD1, which is World Liberty Financial's own stablecoin, against that WLFI collateral.
Mhm.
So check this out. They put up WLFI, which is a valueless made up token, and
Well,
then they
and keep in mind, in doing this, they maxed out the liquidity pool to where nobody else can extract their liquidity. So they basically locked everybody in. But go ahead.
right, but just think about it this way, like, if you're a company and you can launch a token that has no value at all, and then deposit that token as collateral, and then borrow dollars against it, like, dude, if you're a company, you got to do that all day because it's free money. The
No,
W yeah.
they didn't dump it necessarily on the market, so they're not dumping the price, but they're accessing that liquidity without dumping their token on the market and devaluing their token. But David, go ahead and continue because I know where this is going.
Yeah, so here, why don't we just bring up, as we're talking about this, why don't I just bring up the chart of WLFI? Because, there's a reason why the team at WLFI, there's a reason why they gated, they wouldn't let people sell.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
there's
those that don't know what David's talking about, they actually blacklisted some wallets and did some other things to basically make it so people, and there's a bunch of locked supply that basically prevents people from being able to sell this token, other than the insiders, the ones that have actual liquid tokens.
right. And that's just such a scam. Imagine you buy into this protocol, this company, and you get allocated all these WLFI tokens, and then you get your own wallet blacklisted where you can't even sell it. Like, dude, that is a straight up scam. But here's the thing. Here's what they did on Dolomite. They, number one, the company creates this valueless WLFI token, and at the same time, they create this USD1 stablecoin, which is actually backed by cash and treasuries. Okay. So there's actual value behind USD1. There
So,
is,
so they put up a pile of shit and withdrew gold.
yes, yes, it's exactly what they did. And it's brilliant if you can get away with it.
Yeah,
And they're getting away with it because they're in power right now.
yeah.
So, here's the problem. If the price of WLFI drops, the protocol must sell WLFI to cover the USD1 loan.
Basically
However,
liquid.
right. However, since the Treasury, the WLFI Treasury, is the largest holder, a mass sale of WLFI would tank the price even further, which would lead to more liquidations. That's the doom loop. That's the death loop,
It's a
where
cascade.
exactly, it's the cascade. And so they are doing everything in their power to avoid that. And you know what? It looks as though it's a foregone conclusion. Just taking a look at the chart here, Mike. This low, that was the October 10th flash crash low. And the thing about the October 10th crash was it basically
You know,
showed us.
real quick, the other thing
Mm,
that this does is it allows them to access that liquidity without dumping the token. It probably gets rid, I'm not an expert, but it probably gets rid of a lot of legal liability, because they're not dumping the token. And it's also a non-taxable event because they've taken a loan out on it. They didn't sell it.
yeah, those things are all true. So the problem for me with this entire process is that this WLFI token is just another example of a valueless shitcoin. Like this is shitcoinery at its finest right
That's,
here.
backed by Trump's name.
Right. That's all it is. And
That's the only value. It's that it's Trump's company.
right. But like, dude, how many of these companies has he started that turn out to be just complete bullshit where everyone loses their money, but he makes some money?
Yeah.
Like he's done a lot of these,
No,
you
he has.
know?
Well, I mean,
So like,
what was that? A cancer foundation that he like siphoned a bunch of money off of years ago, and it's yeah. Anyway, I don't want to get on a rabbit trail. Keep going.
no. So I'm just saying that WLFI is just another example of a shit coin that has no value, that does nothing, that is vapor, and what they've done with Dolomite. And in fact, you know what, Mike, we can probably hop on over to Dolomite and see that market. So in order to do that, the first step is going to be to hop on over here to DeFi Llama. And from DeFi Llama in the search bar, we're going to type in Dolomite. Dolomite is an Arbitrum native money market, but they had at one point a lot of liquidity from Bera, from the Bera chain, which, just as an aside, what a horrible project. And what a horrible name. Like, dude, I don't want to have liquidity on the Bear chain.
Well,
I
and
want
not
liquidity on the Bull chain.
well, and not to mention that the founder. I mean, it's kind of a conflict of interest, potentially with he's the founder and he's the CTO of World Liberty Fi.
Right, right. So you talk about conflict of interest. There it is, right there. So if we just open up, Dolomite. Now, I used to really like Dolomite, and I still do. I still do. I think that this is a very useful, money market. So number one, just want to make sure that I'm on Arbitrum.
Holy
I
shit,
bel
30% freaking supplied APY on ARB.
Yeah, but I mean, this is Arbitrum itself is a great example of just a shitcoin.
Yeah.
So here's ARB. This ARB token. Yeah, so ARB, I can't understand. I don't understand its reason for existing. Like what exactly does this exist for?
And that's why
I can't.
like deeply understanding the tokenomics of these investments that we make, and I use the air quotes purposefully, is if the tokenomics aren't right, you're basically buying a shitcoin.
Yeah, 100%. I think this is just a governance token. Um, so the idea is that you swap your cash for this shitcoin so that you can vote on governance proposals for the Arbitrum chain. That there's no value there. There's no value. That doesn't provide any value to you, the holder of the token. So you can't swap into this thing. Like it doesn't, this has no reason for existing. This
Yeah.
is just nonsense. So that's a little bit about ARB right there. But what I want to find here is I want to find that USD1 market. So I'm pretty sure if I just search for it, we should be able to find it. USD1. Okay, maybe it's on a different chain. Okay, so I'm just going to go to earn, or maybe I got to go to borrow. And from borrow, I'm just looking for the market. I'm looking for that USD1 market. You know what? It might actually be on Berachain. It could
Oh,
be
oh,
it could be on Berachain here. Let me just see if I can find this market. USD1. Nope, don't see it. WLFI. Nope, don't see that either. Okay, so I just want to scroll down through it. All I'm trying to do here is find that WLFI USD1 market over here on Dolomite.
I
And
knew Jeff was going to say something when you said Barachain. He was like, "Oh God, not Barachain." There, there,
yeah,
there was some stuff that went down with that when he was farming the airdrop.
yeah, yeah, man. They really, really did a disservice to all of their early investors.
Yeah.
Um, so there it is, World Liberty Financial, WLFI. So I found the market over here on mainnet. I just want to check and see on Mantle if there's liquidity for it on Mantle. Okay, there is not. I don't even know what Botanics is. Like this must be some random layer two. Here's Bearer chain. Like, dude, I don't want money on the Bearer chain. Like that's for anyone who doesn't know, bear means go down, number go
Yeah.
down.
Yeah.
So I don't
Terrible,
want it's
terrible mark.
horrible, horrible. And just taking a look through this Barra chain market, I'm just looking for a USD1. Okay, nope, it's only on mainnet. So here's mainnet, and let's hop on into that USD1 market, and let's just see. Okay, there it is, USD1. Got it. Okay, so yeah, I can see where the APY really spiked, and that must have been a result of utilization pushing sharply higher here.
Yeah.
So this is, you can borrow USD1 here, but to borrow, you're going to be paying that borrow APY of, nearly 6%. Now to supply it, you're going to earn 11.36%, but you're getting World Liberty Financial lending rewards. So that's kind of interesting. The way that they incentivize, supplying this USD1 coin. You see how this is circular. So
Yeah.
if I'm the World Liberty Financial Protocol and I create this WLFI token, which has no value, and then I dump it on the market and incentivize regular users to buy my USD1 stablecoin product by offering World Liberty Financial token rewards or incentives on Merkle. What they're doing is they're continuing to pump this WLFI token and use it to get more real dollars into their USD1 coin, which
Yeah.
is just like a stable coin here. So they're giving you something with no value, WLFI, in exchange for cash, which if you're the business, World Liberty Financial, it's a great business model. Sell something that's worthless and get
Mhm.
paid for it. Like, okay, yeah, but
Yeah.
that's a great example of why these projects need to die,
Yeah.
because crypto cannot continue to be the safe haven for scams like this. Like, and it is. And my concern, Mike, with the Clarity Act and the legislation that is being proposed right now is that, it, number one, disincentivizes Americans from building crypto and DeFi protocols in America because they get regulated out of the market. And,
Oh shit.
um, it ends up making all of these, shit coins like more legitimate in some way. Like, dude, XRP is being categorized as a digital commodity now,
Oh yeah.
so like,
Sorry, man. I don't mean to cut you off, but we only got 6 minutes left, and I wanted to get to a couple other things. You mind if we kind of
100%.
perfect? Thank you. So let's educate people real quick on the difference between DeFi and CDeFi. So basically, how do you distinguish between true decentralized protocols and centralized DeFi like World Liberty Fi? So things like Uniswap, Aave, potentially Aerodrome, Morpho, decentralized protocols like that, as opposed to things like World Liberty Fi that obviously isn't decentralized.
Sure. So it comes down, for me, it comes down to custody and who owns the keys.
Hmm.
So if you custody your own keys, then that is real DeFi. Real DeFi is non custodial. Real DeFi is permissionless, which means that anyone with an internet connection can use it. There's no KYC, no ID checks, no none of that. And in true DeFi, code is law and everything is verifiable on chain. So an example of true DeFi would be something like Uniswap or Aave or Curve. These are permissionless, non-custodial protocols with no KYC. Everything is verifiable on chain. Code is law. Now, CDeFi is not non-custodial, which means that the custody can be managed by whatever the protocol is. So you might use like a more familiar login, like maybe you use like a Google login, maybe use an email to log in rather than a wallet, rather than your keys. The protocol might be able to help you recover your account because they manage it. They custody your keys, your assets. That's much different than DeFi, because in true DeFi, it's non-custodial. You own your keys. In CDeFi, it is custodial, where it's managed by the protocol. You don't own your keys. That's the core difference, number one. Number two is the access. So in true DeFi, it's permissionless. Anyone with an internet connection can use it. No KYC, code is law. In CDeFi, access is permissioned. You must pass KYC AML so that the government or region that you live in can steal from you. And then governance for CDeFi is, the company or protocol, it's controlled by a central group of people or stakeholders rather than a large, anonymous, decentralized community. So yeah, CDeFi is not DeFi. It's the illusion. It's the illusion of DeFi.
All right. So we got two more. So real quick, it talks about how to perform due diligence in 2026. So in a favoritism environment, like we've seen with some of these crypto projects that have been deemed commodities, traditional due diligence changes. Investors must now analyze not just the technology and the economics of a project, but also its political connections and regulatory risk. So, I mean, kind of what's your thoughts on navigating those waters, and how much weight do you put on political connections and regulatory risk? Because the last thing that I want to talk about is the regulatory trap. So, obviously, if this is Trump's second term, so he's not getting reelected. We got midterms coming up where the Congress, the House or the Senate could flip, and that can change the winds when it comes to crypto regulations. So how much weight do you put into political connections and regulatory risk when you're assessing and doing your due diligence?
So I like to think out on a longer time horizon. So it's likely that under a different administration, many of these rules being put forward by the SEC and CFTC, that unless there is legislation and those rules become law, codified into law, if they don't, then a different administration could reverse them overnight. So this is likely just a short-term thing unless it gets codified. So all of those, the Sweet 16, those tokens that have been deemed to be commodities by this SEC CFTC joint interpretation that was released on March 17th, that could be reversed overnight. And when it comes to favoritism, World Liberty Financial, dude, under a different administration, World Liberty Financial would get sued out of existence.
Oh,
so
dude.
yeah. So like, this favoritism, I think, only exists now. It may not exist in the future. And so to me, that makes most of those digital commodities codified by SEC, CFTC, that joint interpretation, and WLFI, it makes them uninvestable. Okay. Now you've got this regulatory moat, right? The problem for me with this regulatory moat is I don't understand the attach detach framework that the SEC CFTC came up with to say that a new coin when it first launches is categorized as a security, and then can become a digital commodity down the road as long as certain conditions are met. The reason why I don't understand that is because it seems as though that framework doesn't apply to the Sweet 16. So there are 16 assets that have been, deemed to be digital commodities that don't seem to meet the SEC CFTC's own detached framework guidelines. So, like,
And that's
I
that
don't.
political favoritism, I think.
I think it is. I think that's exactly what it is. And it's a real shame, because we could get regulatory clarity, but it doesn't seem like it's likely to happen anytime soon.
All right. So the last one, spotting a regulatory trap. So basically what this is about is, projects that seem too confident in their regulatory status without a clear legal pathway. And I think that what you were just talking about is potentially, falls into that category. Even that Sweet 16. I mean, has any of that been codified into law, or
No.
is that just the current administration stance and the current people running the CFTC and the SEC? And if the midterms go the way of the Democrats that have been historically very bearish on crypto, and if a Democrat gets elected, or somebody, even a Republican that isn't crypto friendly, gets elected into office, the presidency here in 2 years, can that change, and will that change? And obviously, if it does, what does that do to those projects?
Yeah, well, I mean, if we're talking about, political alignment, and this regulatory trap, I think it's when a project uses high-level political optics for, replacing project safety, when the underlying
And you
mechanics.
call that a call to authority or something like that?
I don't think it's quite a call to authority, but it definitely is a trap. It's this, especially if we're talking about the Sweet 16, it's like a commodity by decree political trap, because that 2026, the March 17th, 2026 SEC CFTC joint interpretation, that is not law. That
No,
is just like a statement.
it's a guideline, not a rule.
Right. It's not a law. It's just like, guidelines that they came out with.
Yeah.
And so that is a great example of a political alignment regulatory trap, because that could be reversed overnight. And all of those projects in that Sweet 16, although they're aligned with the, administration now, if a different administration comes into power and reverses that SEC CFTC joint interpretation, then all of those Sweet 16 tokens, they could get really hurt as a result of that. And they should. They should. Most of those Sweet 16 are bullshit.
Yeah.
Um, but that's an example of the trap. You see, those Sweet 16 are, given this status now as a result of political alignment. But the moment that that alignment goes away, well, that's the trap. That's the regulatory trap. So, yeah, I really, really don't like the language that's being used in this Clarity Act. And I don't like the framework that the SEC and CFTC have come up with, because I'm just concerned that it's going to essentially regulate innovators out of the digital asset market in the United States and essentially push people to South America and Southeast Asia. So, yeah, the regulatory trap is real, Mike. It is real, and just be careful.
Yeah. All right. No, I think that about covers our show for today. We were able to cover quite a bit about kind of what it is that, and as always, we're going to point out what it is that we use, what measuring stick that we use when we're assessing projects, and if we're going to invest our liquidity into them or not. And it's up to you all. We're not going to hype anything. We're going to give the good and the bad on everything, but it's up to you all. We're not spoon feeding you. You still need to do your due diligence. It's up to you what you do with this information. But again, We aren't paid, incentivized to talk about any of these things. We just find, things that we find interesting and share that with you. And, and hopefully educate you a little bit more about, different ways of looking at these assets other than, and if you're going to trade short term, yeah, no, you can trade a lot of these that, we kind of dump on like XRP and stuff. There's a lot of money to be made. And, because a lot of them that get a lot of mind share have a lot of volatility. So, there's money to be made there, but, you need to understand how you're investing in these. Would I buy some of these long term? Absolutely not. Anything Trump is attached to, like Jay talks about, here in 2 years, depending on who gets elected into office next, potentially, yeah, anything that Trump is a part of, it, could get hunted down, and anybody that's a part of those groups, could face charges, or indictments, or something. The way that politics have gotten is it's very much like that. So be very careful about some of these projects, because yeah, they might be bullish. Like when World Liberty Fi first came out and Trump coin first came out, there was a lot of people making a lot of money. But the Trump token, the meme coin, took a dump, and potentially, depending on how regulation goes and how elections go here in the future, very, very ugly things could happen. And I don't know if I would want exposure, to any of that. So, anything to close us out, David?
Yeah, I mean, everyone have a great and safe weekend. We're going to run the daily market wrap today in 2 hours at the end of the session. And looking forward to seeing everyone on Monday.
Absolutely. And make sure that you join us this evening. Myself and Jeff will be doing Crypto and Chill at 5 p.m. Pacific time. And so, yeah, and hopefully y'all have a great weekend. If you want to join Jeff for the, his DJ set on Saturday evening, or Jay and Ellie for their gaming on Sunday, then, we'd love to have you. So give us a like, give us a follow. And until next time, Veteran Crypto out.
Peace.